Hello, good morning, everyone.
Good
Good
morning.
morning, Arnav, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. So we'll be starting now. Thank you for your patience and a very good morning and welcome all our esteemed speakers, VRARA members, and all guests and attendees that have joined us today. I'm Arnav Sood. I am responsible for market growth at Jio Tesseract, and I'll be your host for today. We gather today to launch the Mumbai chapter of the global VRAR Association with a singular aim of democratizing XR and putting India at the forefront of XR. Today, we have industry leaders joining us to share their insights, learnings, experiences, and best practices when it comes to leveraging XR for your business or developing content for the masses that is engaging and intuitive for all users. Our goal is to engage and empower innovators and creators with the power of revolutionary XR tech. Once again, welcome, sit back and enjoy the session. Just moving ahead, some basic instructions and guidelines that I would request everyone to follow here. We'll be taking question and answers after every session. Please use the chat feature to answer your questions, and there's a specific format that we would like you to follow while you're asking your questions. Please mention the speaker name along with your question whenever you're asking your questions. This session will be on mute only mode, and guests and attendees won't be able to switch on their cameras and mics. You will have to type all your questions on the chat, and we would request everyone to kind of tag Geo Tesseract and VRARA, and we would love to have your feedback and love to have your experience of this session. With this, we start our first session, and for that, I would like to invite and introduce Mr. Pradeep Khanna. Pradeep Khanna is the Executive Director, Asia Pacific, Sydney Chapter President, and Global Co-Chair Education for Global AR/VR Association, and he's also the CEO of Global Mindset. He has 30 plus years of executive experience and has been a leader for IBM Australia and New Zealand, leveraging India, China, Philippines, Vietnam, Egypt, Romania, Brazil, and Argentina during his tenure at IBM. Pradeep is also an adjunct professor in Australia, Singapore, and India. Pradeep is a regular speaker at international conferences, and in 2019, he presented in 27 international conferences all over the world. He's an acknowledged leader in emerging technologies and edtech. He's also on the advisory boards of numerous companies. He's also the convener for global chapters and emerging technologies for IIT Delhi Alumni Association, a worldwide community of more than 50,000 professionals. A very welcome, sir, and over to you to kickstart the session and the launch of Mumbai chapter.
Thank you very much, Arnav. I am delighted to be here speaking to all of you today for launching the Mumbai chapter for the Global VRAR Association. In my talk today, I'm calling this session the Metaverse and Oxygen Cylinder. And I will walk you through why I have called this session the Metaverse and the Oxygen Cylinder. At the beginning of the talk, realizing that our audience comes from various segments, some may or may not have an understanding of what virtual reality or augmented reality is. I will just take 1 minute to walk people through what is it that we are talking about. And I will also request Priyanka to share my presentation with everybody. To let me let us imagine that we are not in the COVID days and I'm physically there in Bombay in front of you. And we are sitting face to face, either in an auditorium or somewhere else. We are real people. We are sitting on real tables and chairs. On the other hand, if I want to get an experience of landing on Mars, can I do that physically? No, I cannot do it physically. I create an artificial or a virtual environment through which I get this experience. That artificial environment that we create is called virtual environment. And the span as you go from the real world to the virtual world is called mixed reality. Priyanka, can you just change the slide, please? Go on to the next slide itself. This is where it describes the continuing from the real world to the virtual world. It is analogous to, let's say that if you were sitting in a classroom environment and learning, that would be face-to-face teaching, which is akin to the real world. And on the other hand, we go on for totally online learning, which would be something similar to a virtual world. In between, you got some combination of face-to-face teaching as well as online learning, and that is called blended learning. Likewise, the space in between the real world and the virtual world is called mixed reality and is some combination of real and virtual worlds. Remember, in between is a stage called augmented reality, where we are still in the real world, but we can have digital objects in front of us. And an example, this would be an IKEA app, where if you scan the QR code or if you scan the picture of an object, let's say a table or a chair, the digital image of the table or chair comes in front of you while you are still in the real world. That is augmented reality. So the stages are you go from the real world to one step which is called augmented reality, and you increase the level of digital content and you come to augmented virtuality, and finally you come to an environment which is totally virtual, and that is virtual reality. Now I realize that a lot of you and these people know a lot, but when I looked at the list, there were some people whom I thought that we should go through these principles. Priyanka, can we change over to the next slide? It's also important to know that while these technologies have been around for the last 25 years, we are at that sweet spot in time where we are seeing a game changing take place in immersive technologies. Today, the take up of VR, AR, XR, MR, along with so many other acronyms, is the highest in gaming and entertainment. It is the second highest in education and training, third in health, fourth in real estate, architecture, construction, and then followed by aeronautical, automobile, defense, mining, travel, tourism, etc. Can we move over to the next slide, please? In terms of functions, marketing, training, and field operations are the most commonly used functions which leverage VR AR. Next slide, please. So the question which comes to all of our mind is that as these technologies have been around for the last 25 plus years, are we at the tipping point? Let me tell you that I get invited to speak on VR AR all over the world. When I speak at these conferences, what I find is 70% of the audience does not even know the difference between VR and AR. And that tells me that we are not at the tipping point now. But what is happening? 5G is the game changer for VR AR. What 5G does is it takes away the latency, it gets people to collaborate in immersive technology environment. It also takes a lot of functionality of the head-mounted device, which is that geeky thing that you wear on your head, to the cloud, making it much thinner. In other words, 5G brings about a transformational change in VR AR. Now 5G will take about 7 to 8 years to come to full functionality. And likewise, we've now got an 8 years roadmap for VR AR. And we are going to see the tipping happening within the next 2 or 3 years. So we have this beautiful window of opportunity where this emerging technology, which has been around for the last 25 years, is heading towards the tipping point. And what do we mean by tipping point? We mean that it is heading towards mainstream adoption. Of course, the questions come that will it be VR or will it be AR which will be more dominant? Will it be enterprise or consumer which will be more dominant? The reality is that VR is more mature technology, but AR is where the world is heading towards. In between the choice of consumer and enterprise, there are equally strong projections for both. So, ladies and gentlemen, sit tight and enjoy the journey, be part of it. And as I will walk you through what is happening now, as well as what are the emerging trends. Priyanka, can I ask you to go to the next slide? At this stage, I want to talk a bit about VR AR Association. We are the largest VR AR focused association in the world with 70 plus chapters worldwide, 4,400 plus entities registered with us, and a community of tens and thousands of people. We are getting together people from all stakeholder groups, demand, supply, industry, academia, and anybody else that you can name into the huge global community that we are building. The challenge is that at the moment VR AR is a bit like the Wild West. Nobody knows who's doing what. And unless you are part of a community and you're across what are the global trends, not only in VR AR but also in your focus area, it is very difficult to validate the journey that we are on. And that is where VR AR Association comes in. Priyanka, can you change the slide, please? The VR AR ecosystem per se, there are different ways of looking at. One way is it has players from hardware, software, rendering engines, apps, content, platform. Another way to look at it is that it has got business perspectives, technology perspectives, and creative perspectives. And yet another way is, as I mentioned today, of different stakeholder groups. And when I'm making such presentations in face to face, and when I do it in Sydney, I normally ask questions and hand out bottles of wines as to those people who answer the questions correctly. I can't do that at this particular point in time because I am happily sitting in Sydney. You guys are located all over the world, and all I can do is, give you virtual bottles of wine. And if I was asking the question, I would have asked that, do you know how many companies are there in India who are into VR AR? And the answer is, as you can see in the PowerPoint presentation, there are around 2,500 entities in VR AR in India alone. In Australia, there are around 1,500. In China, there are 3,500. In South Korea, there are about 1,000 entities. In UK, there are around 2,000 entities. That's the nature. While the hardware side is all dominated by global players and there's a high degree of concentration, there is a very large degree of fragmentation among the content players. 75% of these 2,500 entities in India tend to be startups. One person, 5, 20, 25 means they have gone big. So, how do we kind of build up a cohesive ecosystem? And that is why we need the process maturity of a larger organization blended with the nimbleness of a startup. And that's why we've got some great members like Jio Tesseract, Bharat Petroleum, Robert Bosch, Whistling Woods, and so many others. And some of these are taking leadership positions. For example, Jio is leading the Mumbai chapter, Bosch is leading the Bangalore chapter, because that's how we are getting this blend of process maturity and the nimbleness of those startups. The association is also strongly focused on capacity building. And I'll give you one example, because when I look at the Indian environment, I see two issues straight away. I see a mismatch of skills between demand and supply. When I look at Unreal, there seems to be some kind of a skill shortage in different parts of the country. But even in the case of Unity skills, for example, there are regions of oversupply and regions of undersupply. And the biggest thing in technology or in emerging technology is that we need to have proper collaboration between industry and academia. So the capacity building initiative is going to take the shape of two focus areas in terms of hardware, where the availability of hardware is not that very easy in India. And the second is in regard to skills. And by having a four-part collaboration model where you have an industry from the demand side or actual using side, you've got the industry from the solution side, you've got an academic or a training provider, and you've got the students for training. And along this lines also, one of the biggest advantages of VRARA is the global association. So how do we think global and act local? And we have kick-started yesterday discussions to build up an Asia-Pacific and a Europe corridor. And what does that mean? So within that corridor, we'll be now, having joint events featuring two specific countries. Let's say hypothetically India and Portugal. That provides an opportunity for global access to members. And there is a lot more happening. But now enough about VRARA. Let's look at the emerging trends. And first and foremost, and if you go over to the next slide, is you will see 5G, which I've already talked about. The importance of telecom companies and the role that they are playing is at number of levels. At infrastructure level, these companies are laying 5G. But these companies are also looking at offering value-added services to include immersive experiences. As I always say, that July last year will be remembered as a very, very important milestone in the history of India's VRAR journey, when Jio Tesseract launched smart glasses. All this is being enabled by 5G. Now, moving on to the next trend on the next slide. There are a number of forecasts as to what shape, that geeky looking device or the head mounted device that we wear for getting, some of these immersive experiences, what shape will it take? And a lot of research indicates that the future device is going to be something like a smart glass that you're seeing in this picture. And to a certain extent, it is possible that the smart glass may replace the mobile phone that we carry with us all the time. Now, what that timeline is going to be is very difficult to say because being a futurist is a mug's game. You can't even see 6 months ahead, leave aside 5 to 10 years. Let's go on to the next trend. And this you will see is a photo of a showroom of Hyundai showroom. This is taken at a time when in 2019 I was speaking at a Seoul VRAR Expo in South Korea. I again spoke this year, but this year was online. In the evening, when I was walking through the mall, the largest mall in Seoul, I came across a showroom which was set up by Hyundai. Now you could walk into the showroom, get into VR and design your own car. You could choose what bells and whistles you want. And after that, if you wanted, you could order the car. If not, just okay, you had a good experience. Now, this is one version of what we call location based VR. And what the word implies is that really it is that hardware is already installed at a place, you go there for an experience. This, before the COVID situation, was taking the shape of what we called as location based entertainment. Now, in the COVID days, nobody wanted to borrow head mounted devices. So the location based entertainment virtually came to a standstill. But going forward, this will change to location based experiences, and we'll be possibly conducting training programs in VR. And you go to a center where all the head mounted devices or hardware is already installed. Either you take your content or the center has already partnered with you to offer content. You get a training in the VR world, and you pay a fee only on user pay basis. This is where location based experiences is heading towards, of course, on the assumption that after within a year or so, the whole world will be vaccinated and we would have got rid of this COVID kind of a situation, or at least it would be a manageable situation. Now let's look at the next trend: collaborative immersion. And what does that mean? We are already collaborating on Microsoft Teams at the moment. We collaborate every day on Zoom. But where we are talking about now is collaborating in the immersive environment, where we are talking about, say, and I give you an example of Ford Motors. When cars are being designed, there are people located in different parts of the world, how they get into the VR environment and to kind of discuss and design cars. The same thing goes for social collaboration. And we've got leaders in the Bombay chapter who are doing some great work in developing these kind of frameworks and platforms for models of collaboration in large organizations, which can be extended even to the social platforms. So let's move on and have a look at the next trend. And this is about, when I say that it is not one technology trend, but how different technology trends are fusing together to have the biggest impact. At the moment, there are so many data points when you are in the VR or AR environment. There's eye tracking, hand tracking, head tracking, and so many other things happening. Just imagine if all this data can be analyzed and can be mined, and we blend that. And further down in the presentation, we will also see an example of how blockchain is fusing with VR, AR, and which is having a big impact in the markets. And now let's look at what else is important or emerging. Today we talk in terms of a VR or AR experience mostly as a visual experience. That is what we see with the eyes and to a certain extent of what we hear. But what about smell? What about taste? What about touch? Well, we are heading in that particular direction. Just like a printer has cartridges for different colors, there are people who are working on devices which can be strapped onto your mouth, and there is a cartridge for different kind of smells. But you see, just imagine if you got to wear one device for seeing, one device for smell, and a couple of other things, then man, you might as well become a robot. So there's still a way to go in this, but that's where we're heading towards. More importantly, as we see, the next trend is what we call as haptics. And this is when you touch something, when your hand touches an object. So what work is going on is how to replicate that, what kind of pressure is being inserted by the hand. This photo has been taken when I was in one of my visits at University of California in San Diego, where the School of Robotics as well as the School of VRARA were collaborating to have a robotic glove, and this I'm talking about 3 years earlier. And when you put on the glove and went into the VR environment, there was a piano lying over there, and when you touched the piano keys wearing the robotic glove, you could get the sensation. Now things have progressed much bigger than, you got whole lot of haptics being involved into VR here, and this is emerging as a very very big area by itself. So let's move on and see what do all of this mean for us. We've looked at broadly what VR AR is. We've talked about the VR AR Association. We've talked about some of the emerging trends. And what I want you to show now is the main one of the main items or components of today's session, which is what I call the metaverse and the oxygen cylinder. And here I want to showcase a video to you. While the video comes on, let me kind of tell you the background for this. You see, last 2 months or so, I've been numbed and shocked to really watch the news and read in the papers as to what kind of challenges people were facing as COVID second wave took hold. There was shortage of cylinders. There were people who were running around, trying to get hospital beds and so on and so forth. Now, just imagine that if people, once they got hold of an oxygen cylinder, how would they install that at home? Well, all you had to do was have an AR app. And with the AR app, it easily walk you through the different steps in terms of how to install an oxygen cylinder. While this is very simple in terms of talking, but imagine the kind of interaction or engagement with this emerging technology people at a very very broad level are having through this app. So I'm seeing that there are some challenges in terms of playing the video at the moment. So let's move on. So broadly, if you see from the video, the app has been developed by actually a company in Pune. And you see, by creating a digital image, it kind of walks. Yeah, have a look now. The app is playing, and let's have a look at this app. So the audio is missing, and I think for that, Priyanka, we have to. There is a system audio button or something like that in Microsoft Teams, which has to be.
Yes,
Act,
second. Once. Is it is it audible, Pradeep?
no, not as yet. That's okay. Let's move on. But just to send the message across that you see, this is how an AR app works. And as you saw the video, there were, a guiding through instruction telling you that, okay, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, how easy it becomes, for you to assemble. And just imagine the impact that this is happening by so many people who are not even exposed to AR VR using the app and learning the power of augmented reality. So let's move on to the next, trend, which is really in one of my visits to China in 2019. I was speaking at a conference at Nanjing in China. I mean, by the way, China has set up 9 cities as VR AR cities. So after the conference was over on the last day, I wanted to travel around and see if there is any sightseeing or any tourist kind of attractions over there. And I visited a temple which was, quite a few hundreds of years old and in its lifetime had been burned down twice and then rebuilt. And they were having this story being told by holographic pictures. As you can see in the picture, the first picture on top on the left is where there are flames emerging, showcasing that the temple is being burnt. Then the next picture on the right on top shows how the building construction activity is happening. The next number 3 slide shows, this is all taken by my mobile camera, the photos. And in front of me, the storytelling is happening in holographic form. The third slide shows that various layers or levels of the building are coming up. And the fourth slide shows how the building has got completed. Just imagine the impact of this. Instead, if you had to read all this, or for that matter, even if somebody was kind of, narrating the story to you without the visuals, what kind of a difference. Our attention span is 8 seconds nowadays. So this is where engagement is the key. And this is where, VR, AR has the highest level of engagement as compared to any other platform or media. Let's move on and let's look at now, we looked at some elements of day-to-day interaction that we are already having in terms of VR, AR at a very simple level. Now comes the question is that, okay, this is great from my experience perspective, but there was another item in the news recently which was taking a lot of share of our mind, especially if we were into bitcoins or any other cryptocurrencies. And this was when Elon Musk used to say, make any comments or positive or negative, the prices of bitcoins would go jump up and down. So why that is relevant? Because I want to get you through another concept of how economic activity is starting in terms of digital assets. And for this, it is important to understand some basic concepts like fungible and non-fungible. Fungible essentially means that you've got multiple items which are similar in nature. And let's take a currency note. Let's say that 100 rupee note or Indian 100 rupee note. Let's say if you have 10 of those, they will be identical to each other. So they can be defined as fungible, which also means similar. On the other hand, if there is a original Picasso painting, now original Picasso painting is only one of a kind. It is a unique. That is called non-fungible. So what is the biggest challenge when you start going into the digital world? It's a challenge even in the real world, but in the digital world, the challenge is how do you know that the, the digital asset or any digital person is really who, what they are portraying themselves to be, which is trust in the digital economy. And this is where as we look in the next slide, is non-fungible tokens, which are now playing a big part. In a sense, a non-fungible token is nothing but like a certificate of authenticity. Like in the case of a Picasso painting, it has got an NFT or non-fungible token which says that this is the original Picasso painting and this is being owned by XYZ. Now, how do we are confident that this is actually the truth? Because NFTs are based on blockchain technology, which enables to issue a NFT which kind of confirms or is a certificate of authenticity. So today we are now entering into a world where just like we buy and sell houses or clothes or anything like that, we can be buying and selling digital assets. And a very, very interesting example is a digital model of New York Stock Exchange sold recently for $23,000. But this is nothing, but let's have a look at some more interesting examples as we go over. And the first example that I will give you is of a digital artist by the name of Mike Winkelmann, also known as Beeple. I have no idea how the name Beeple came about, but the interesting part is that this guy started posting one work of art, a digital art, every day from 1st May 2007. He did that for next 5,000 days, which effectively is the next 13 and a half years. So end of the 5,000 days, there was a collection of 5,000 pieces of art. This collection of 5,000 pieces of art was sold earlier this year for $69 million by Christie's. So the important point to note in this is that who did the sale or the auction? It was a mainstream entity like Christie's. So we are seeing mainstream entities now entering into what we call as the crypto economy. And the second point to note is that the amount it went for was $69 million. Oh man, I'll be happy with even $6,900. Leave aside $69 million. But this is the fundamental changes which are happening and how they are getting blended into VR. Let's have a look further. And on the next slide, you will see a sneaker. And why am I showing you a sneaker over here is because Gucci came out recently with digital sneakers and they priced them between $9 and $12. And man, what the hell? Who's going to pay $10 for a virtual sneaker and what are they going to do? So one of the advantages of AR is that there is a typical type of offering called Try Me AR, where you can actually try on a digitally and see whether some piece of adornment fits you well or you like it or not, kind of stuff. So what people were doing was they were trying on these digital sneakers through Try Me AR and then digitally wearing them, getting themselves photographed for putting it on social media. Well, I didn't know that one would wanted to spend $10 to try on, but that's life. And likewise, there's another brand which is RFT Studios, and here they came out also with sneakers. I don't know why people chose only sneakers, but that's life. And you could try it on Snapchat. Now these guys came out with 3 styles of sneakers and 600 pairs and sold the whole thing for $3.1 million. So there's a whole new economy which is emerging, and you can see how AR and VR is kind of blending into the commerce activity and blending with blockchain because all of these were possible in getting economic activity. In the first case, when we gave that example of the artist through NFTs, and in this case also NFTs, because you see, if you see a digital sneaker, how can you be sure that this is exactly a Gucci sneaker? So let's go on now. So you're seeing that what is happening. Now these are trends that at one end I gave you some examples of multi-sensory AR VR coming up, how 5G is reshaping, and the other hand I also gave you some instances of how economic activity is coming up. Now let's get down to the second item on my title for this presentation, which is metaverse and the oxygen cylinder. We spoke about oxygen cylinder, which is we can see impacting millions of people at this point in time. But what is a metaverse and what are mini metaverses? And here I will take you where? Let's go and see this YouTube if you are able to do it. Or okay, the first YouTube version which we are seeing at the moment is Facebook is creating what it calls a metaverse or a world of its own called Horizon. This is currently in beta mode and you have to be invited to experience that. But it is exactly that you're creating a virtual world where you can do anything. You have an avatar, you can you can have a mustache, you can do whatever you want to do over there, and that's exactly how it is emerging. Now we have now gone on to the second one, which is actually, I suppose, and what we would call the symbolic version of a metaverse. This is a movie which came out in 2018 called Ready Player One. It was Steven Spielberg movie. It shows a world where you are just going between the virtual world and the real world very seamlessly back and forth. You want an experience, you go to the virtual world. Yeah, let's play the video and see.
A hidden key, a leap not taken. Retrace your steps, escape your past, and the key will be yours at last. What part of your past are you trying to escape, Halliday? This is the Oasis, a whole virtual universe. You can do anything, be anyone, without going anywhere at all. The Oasis was created by James Halliday, and what he left behind changed everything. A contest. 3 impossible challenges. The first to finish gets complete control of the Oasis, which means complete control of the future.
The contest has got to be about connecting with someone, connecting with the world. So we take it together?
Sure. Save the Oasis.
Save the world.
Players, are you ready?
That's better. I'll wave to you from the finish line. McFly.
Okay, so let's move on to back to the presentation. And this looks very futuristic, one of those science fiction kind of things. But when I would play what Facebook is doing at the moment in creating Horizon, you will get a picture of how many metaverses are being created. Likewise, most of us would know Epic Games. They are also well known for their gaming engine Unreal, but they are also very well known for a game called Fortnite, which was launched in 2017 as a game for four people. Today, that Fortnite has become a mini metaverse by itself. And when I say mini metaverse, it's a universe of its own. Now, in Fortnite, what happens is that all the user community develops the games and content. So, Fortnite has got millions of titles. But today, Fortnite has become a platform for having global musical concerts. There are some fabulous stuff which has been actually played out on Fortnite in 2020, which was joined in by 12 million people all over the world. So, what we are seeing is that mini metaverses are emerging. And by the way, Epic Games raised $1 billion in April this year in their stated goal of creating a metaverse, out of which 200 million was put in by Sony. And undoubtedly so because they have a very big stake in the gaming industry. But the point of showing all this was that look, at one end, we've got the oxygen cylinder, which at the moment, by simplicity of what it is doing and is impacting millions of people in their lives, in the challenging period, and how it's getting people to get interacted with immersive technologies. On the other hand, is you've got this, futuristic things which are coming out, different things which are coming out, and at some point of time, all these different universes will be combined together to form a metaverse where the real world and the virtual world are just intermingled. It's a combination of the digital twin, it's got AR, VR, blockchain, everything thrown in. And this would require much longer discussion, but that was what I wanted to talk about in my session today. That at one end, the technology has been around for the last 25 years, and because of 5G is now heading into tipping point in the next 2 to 3 years, and then an explosive growth, then also to look at what are the emerging trends in terms of multisensory, in terms of blending of different emerging technologies, in terms of haptics, etc. Then also to look at how economic activity is coming up in virtual assets in a virtual world. And finally, all of these pieces are being joined together on a much longer focus for a metaverse. When that happens, I don't know, but this is where we have different parts of the world today in, you know, playing out different versions of how best to leverage immersive technologies. So, thank you very much. This is the end of my session, and I enjoyed the discussion, and I look forward to in the global journey that we are on, getting all of you on board collectively and building a huge community so that as the technology goes mainstream, we are here to maximize the use both from my experience perspective as well as from our professional perspective. Take care. Bye for now. And enjoy the morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever in your part of the world, because I know that we have people who have registered from different parts of the world. Back to you, Arnav.
Thank you, Pradeep. I think that was wonderful, very insightful, very intriguing, and I can see the responses from the crowd that everyone enjoyed your session. Really very relevant, really very trendy. All the trends were like really great and very thought-invoking, I would say. I think moving on to the next session, this is a keynote session by Kshitij Marwa. It's on 5G and the future of XR. And I think without further ado, I would invite Kshitij and quickly introduce Kshitij. Kshitij Marwa is a Forbes 30 under 30 and MIT Technology Review Most Innovator under the age of 35, a graduate from the MIT Media Labs, and he's the founder and CEO of Jio Tesseract, a MIT Media Lab spin-off and a public subsidiary of Reliance Industries Limited, with the aim of democratizing mixed reality into the masses. Prior to Tesseract, Kshitij was leading the MIT Media Lab India initiative with the aim of creating a design-led platform in India for innovation. He has been covered across Forbes, USA Today, MIT Tech Review, TED, and numerous patents and publications are to his name. Welcome, Kshitij, and I would like you to take over and start the session.
Sure. Thank you, Arnav, and thank you, Pradeep, for a great introduction. And it's I'm very glad to have you here. I don't know what's the time in Australia right now, but I'm sure it's very early. Cool.
Lovely to meet you once again, though virtually, Kshitij. And just for everybody else, Kshitij is also an IIT Delhi alumni, and I'm proud of what he's done.